She's like a cartoonist.
You did say it.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I heard it.
What it is about like.
Okay, welcome to the Visiting Writers Series. We do not have a microphone today, so you'll get to hear the voices as they move naturally through the air. I was afraid there was also not a recording device, but I do see green lights hovering on the wall back there recording this. Thank you all for being here on a beautiful evening. Appreciate you coming in out of the warm weather. This is our final Visiting Writers Series event of the spring, and I'm really thrilled to have Ryan Skrabalak and Alicia Wright reading. We have one more English department sponsored event, or two more English department sponsored events. First Friday at 12:30 here or no?
At 11:45.
Oh, sorry.
That's
11:45.
Here.
I'm going to turn this part over.
That's okay. Yeah, 11:45 here. We'll have a speaker who's sponsored also by the new Medical Humanities program. And she's going to talk about the restorative power of rest, in case anyone feels like rest right now.
Yes.
So, yes.
So that will help us all, I'm sure. So please come to that on Friday. And then the following week on April 18th at 12:30, again, an unusual time, Kenneth Daly will talk about the strange and wonderful 19th century scholar and writer Walter Pater and possibilities for research, including his research into Walter Pater's many questionable and wonderful scholarly habits in his when there was more freedom to invent within scholarship. After the reading, we'll take a 5-minute break, time for a cookie or a drink. And after that, we'll have a question and answer and conversation with the writers until about 7:30, give or take. And either in that 5-minute window or after the reading, you have a chance to say hello to the writers and talk to them a little bit. Okay, Ryan Skrabalak is going to start us off tonight. He wrote the Technicolor Sycamore 10,000 Afternoon Family Earth Band Review, coming out from Ursa Americanus this year, but not quite yet. And also the Orchids, coming out this year from Above Ground Press. He's also written other books, including these two beautiful books, which are available as part of our small press poetry collection. So once I return them, they'll be there, but I wanted to show them to you tonight. He lives in Lawrence, Kansas, where he edits the poetry press and record label Spiral Editions, and he brought many wares on this trip, and he has sold them all to the people, except with one, except he has one left. There's one single ware. There's no longer wares, which is not surprising. I've been lucky enough to be at Spiral Edition events and see the amazing chapbooks and cassettes they make. It's a poetry press that Ryan runs, and also a record label, which makes only cassettes, or also have there been records?
Just cassettes.
Just cassettes.
Yeah, just cassettes.
Yeah.
Tape. I guess tape label.
As a tape, I know,
Yeah.
right? But that would be confusing.
Yeah.
So, record label. He also organizes for AFT Local 6403 and instructs at the University of Kansas and DJs on community radio. Ryan also creates community in many ways. In my brief but very happy time knowing him, with his poetry press and record label, by bringing together people of all kinds to make things, to present things. I was lucky enough to participate in a Spiral Editions reading in Kansas City, where there was somebody making amazing textural sounds as we read and processing our voices, and all sorts of people in an art gallery, collective space. Was really amazing, reminds one why one does this. And I think one of the things I love about having living writers here is we get reminded too that we all are the ones that make books, and people like us that have been making them. And so to get to hear readers is a real treat. He also makes lots of things in his own writing. in the sense of blue, in wood grain, in knitwear, in country, in historic district, in metropolitan life, in aerosol, as he says in one poem, in Idiot Jazz, I think. I can't remember now.
Yeah, it's from this here, Donna.
Oh, in Donna, okay,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I was spending time in both. I'm thrilled to have Ryan here. Please welcome Ryan Skrabalak.
Thank you so much for that introduction. It's really nice to be here. Thanks everyone for being here. This figure behind me, really amazing triangulation I have going on here. I thought that I would actually just read the sort of extended, the expanded universe of this, that of this, which this book comprises a little bit of, which is a larger book called Goes On Now Except. This book was originally titled Dawn of, but people kept on saying Donna instead of Dawn of, and so I just called it Donna instead. It just sort of made sense that way. The book is mostly made up of a longer poem called Flow State, in which other poems are sort of interspersed to break up the long poem of Flow State. So I'll sort of announce when they start or when they end. And each section begins with a sort of table of contents as well, so like sort of that informs the poems. Okay. Topographic lattice nothing. Mother's counter depths, but illumined, he would stand with him in green pulse, flowers on the ruined moon spilling. You saw the histories, sun hits it all, and in others' depths, but illumined in the longer days. Mother's counter depths, but illumined depths, but complement, also germinate or sacred. They watch dirt at this place. Prescriptive wind reads the gaze, westerns, as if I'm spilling, I'm to run, in long, in silences and depths, but clouds, and in lupin wind too, as in writing, sit zazen on orogeny for sunrise fetish, and for being everywhere fetish, and improvised any day in sunrise. He would stand with him in green pulse, oyster wave, the radar's heart, the midden stance that could be used to complete artifact, rendition of shadow, assumed to belong here, chemical melt snow, or sacred melt micro-glittered blue fucker. This is what gives the stream animus, the mountain unwaking, but clouds flung ringing shared with river there and there, a quilt decayed of all that is and is not he. Flowers on the ruined moon spilling from one move's blue husk to next quiet hard, pixels of barn, pearls of tactical architecture, blue double click on eagle, arrowed and saturated in distance, infected to learn more. Frontier peroxide moves, one blonde husk, money from long unwaking universe to other. Ticking sound, hot motor cools after the sister killed the ignition. You saw the histories, you pushed a thumb into them, often within it, but writing to check for ripeness. Sun hits it all. Sun hits every motherfucker. Western as a music, feeling this form in others' depths, but illumined depths, still bright the prose of this from in remembering. A long, unwaking universe, where once textured, serene becomes an argument of the street, more no world with movement. Flung surface, serene becomes an argument like some wind does. And in others' depths, but illumined in the longer days, sun with no question of it, speech for days in others' depths, clouds so impossible, as if by people made, a quilt decayed, arrowed in writing sound. They watch from an argument and architecture, a quiet hard-on everything. Hush, you black semi, melt snow, formerly symptoms of Bible, improvised quiet. Any day in sunrise is and is not he, after the sister killed the ignition to check for ripeness like some wind does, improvised quiet. Flow state. Compass plant came down off romantic love. Carolina Pines, Interstate 95, you go there and feel a penetrating. Mountain heaps of vibration behind the superstructure. Deep wound, unique, brought the future. Schematics of volume and sense, a speedway. Compass plant, milk, tisane. Letting so much more or edges, witnessing. A common name held vertically, wondered aloud. Winds on pin handed to us an expanding translation of heaven words sharing the light in front of the sun. A super place from starry which rose. Studies indicate twisting orientation. North or to western, eidetic taxonomy or senses which can't alone. Early settlers on the Great Plains could make their way in the dark by feeling of the leaves. Terror movement of no verdure, sextant as terror. To west is to harm. Having been riding capacity burrow against the negative sun, too much machine, which shut its doors. Many native groups burned the dried root as a charm during lightning, chewed resin. Of the sun, the reverse is true. Companion plant, narrow world leaves. Came down off of romantic love, step out of dream sublogic, creek water, government wildlife. Sir, this is a convex prosody megavector. Sir, this is a genus. The cathedral vibrates with prayer regime, closer to thee. He was a second in the elapse, a bend in the water. Logic was then a book one finished and didn't understand, but put away on a shelf to reference obtusely in traffic when presented with something outlandish. The hollow rumen of airs, sublogic, of which the day concluded nothing. Undersides reply to it. In and out of the mega green runner beans and their demented genetic sequences. Eat, elate, claim dependence. So what if incumbent? Water algorithmic and swollen with itself, with thoughts of people, prearranged like a gate, considered like a gate, but it would heirloom and then it was researchable landscape, developing the scene like skin, stretched over the organs of sharply. Carolina Pines, Interstate 95, you go there and feel a penetrating despair. Besides what I would say about the glyph, the way they do bend in air to a Scriabin voicing. Motel cuck chair. Ate a bit of rooftop and settled quietly on the shine, the crystal's shitty opus. Ice machine stench. Get in the car, talk back to me, suck on the straw, plus or minus rapidity, plus or minus color sequence, plus or minus blur. His name was Vinny. He was from Syracuse, and he left Judge Joe Mathis on. The dog shit and the thistle behind all of it. Music filled with Astroglide. Dog and repeating broken glass. Sap from the swallow cups. Piano bending. Mountain heaps of vibration beyond the superstructure of oxygen. Commodity roll call. Strip mall. Absence structures the present. Hyper-present, the whirring semi-woods, behind the eyes, double blackness, duplicated haptic on truck forearms, on shine, the promise of neck sweat, which presents its purple there. Others are there. Hot inside the lad's molten galaxy, full moon, amnesia, Dollar General, Wren song. Repetition is neck music in this manner, flexuous upon the phone wire, orchids and cisc, tongue order. When given directive to alt business route or carburetor whiff dilation, please kill me on the 67-degree canopy floor. Deep wound, unique, brought the future of yesterday in shadowed bouquet, but dawn, nobody. Sky that changes seemed of all sounds of own meanings of secret. Pain we do and will these, or can claim them. That is why today I sign the invoice of the absence that fills the shape of our megacorpse. Schematics of volume in sense of blue, in wood grain, in knitwear, in country, in historic district, in metropolitan life and aerosol. In the low-color dawn rippling outside cortex of metals is wind. Wind in that symbol electric pre-happening is eulogy. Echoes could be nothing more than crisis, yellow ontology and fuse, expressive orbit. Vocals came in as folded lichens, okay, or Romanesque, as in taken to semicircle. Acoustic embalming, that which scale of imagining from cortex, the cortex of references, this wave, that God, you and forever. I think I know something, like feeling, like touching upon. The weather shifts this, the living names this, to help exhale. As the sun is aware of toward, but no linear, but vast still is volume. The avant-garde passes through this. I heard a fly buzz, ecstatic auditoria, and checked the resolution, expanding. A speedway, lurch in becoming tapestry, its ontology for exhale almost into clarity, but red roses. Red roses pass through me on 1080p, deep voice, spider-webbed hotel pool clapping almost. Motionless field, but going, quickly speaks its burnt creep, its Nebraska power, which they say is its own music, field music. Serial on your dependence for gain, not enclosure, but extra creep they have it, expanse they have it. They as in flowers, bent in the long light, hidden in the blade of that. Imagine an impossible region looking out the window at you. Ideas as in, motherfucker, a lot of work for not much money, dulled by wanting. On the way, the dream held by all couldn't before that, the corners of the breathing. Real people, Mixolydian culvert. Came down of airs, step out, extending upon it. Came down of airs, supervised no window at the dream airs sublogic, heaps of suck on the absences. What I would say is why today I sign the elapse. Yes, do bend the regime, rumen, which presents, O convex prayer region of dream subology. Repetic taxonomy, romantic shine on government dawn music, eyes could by wanting despairs. This wind. Step out, expending and extending upon shit, aware of vibrating like a thought, invoicing wind, man, the sun, the structure of this overuse of dream. They're all country. They're all duplicated with heaven, of showing the hidden comments. Minus universal human permission remote. Why does it remind me of light deeper into you, pictures in mind, the world growing up among memory to the other sound, or what I do know as it moves and starts pain, as it reminded me, beautiful to see someone thinking. It comes from nowhere. Syllables inevitable when this sentence becomes embedded in your voice that can be drawn about anyway, and beyond conclusions, I can accept the stone I was. An idea of what, not together in its rhythms to fluorescence, the less we knew of it, less the memory of the words. Our lives held on the city, but at those times ceased to exist in the stone I was by, relying on disappear, harmonics, the old invention which that shadow indents and then beautified the air. There densely I lived, the mouth with wide a space I want as birds held in today. The stone I experience is the midnight escaping. Did the meter of being wake up like rain on future sunlight, like 2 points in a thought outside of a circle of periphery in the library of the rain? He sees the brain in all of it sometimes, and I start to describe clouds in Rome, the difference is smeared. We made long with war, life to what I shook it, I mean felt lives. Ask for memory or man lives, your head, when apart from it, one side, no world growing up among that folding light, that building inside. It is inside of it, tomorrow, aka a sound. Bless you.
Thank you.
Flow state. Eyes. Eye to foggy earth. This train is arbitrary, the growth of the space somewhere out of consciousness. Of course, he wonders if his friends are someone made up. Ideas that weren't anywhere near him. An idea he started singing with, an outside all talk, or maybe all three in their message, was sucking his imaginary companion. Now he's much older. Men somehow closed off the brain in the center of two, someone called it goes on doing. The more he could change myself by someone thinking. Consider 1 billion people are books. Anyway, I'm getting off the center of mass human excitability. If something big breathing heavily in my mind, or maybe he could change yourself by the harmonics of light defining the top of the pulses through the next time, and on sets of our crazy ideas. I play a throbbing gibbous, that pressure is the midnight train, it is a valley, for years he's spaced out, to him, each other, transparently without connections, beyond contradictions. His blood pressure lit by odors of history, and in time to tenant my fingertips on dissolve. I put my eyes in changes as taking off writing you, their green grass motions had come along on me. A steady structure a going northern day. We are not the white berries now gloss. Anyways, more rain came horses along. A steady structure a year, he realized. We must have seemed like the valley shifted the time in the hill where the alto of connections rang clear, while the willow amazement at its highest modulation in alto and silver all it was sunlight inside your consciousness. July appears mostly in the no-spray raspberry pints, $5.99 plus tax. Ears begin the loud part. I wrote to watch that weird idea. I could not send the feeling for him waiting below the tart rain coming along. A steady structure, a cycle of night. But not attached of being inside your name, and in the maple heart and sugar on the heaven-like dance, and in the past lives, that treat light constantly changing intensity. He fell down and didn't get back up, and I didn't know I could. The word was one side of being inside yourself and out. Now that's how everyone is basically an hour to exist. Stars appear mostly in a humid page where words were special to each person. Someone called it taking off from history. A steady structure described things even if I don't know I sit here writing you or your mind. There is a history of me imagined in his arms. Someone called it going by. What can take 20 years ago. People started talking and changes as sunlight inside the water, mostly in the afternoon and out. To him, each of the feelings that began a cycle of the past, the milk light to everything else. The day are beads, being inside yourself in 3 types of this country, that someone is thinking. Consider people are not attached nor separate in the harmonics of the same medium, the time in which is setting has erased. Then we made up fast. When you imagine you're in each fiction of 2 kiss somebody, just as it is to teach breath, to answer, to pile and cling, to river, to use a flathead, to animal, to enemy, to throat, to throw in terms, to demo tape, to themselves, from information stream, from dialectics, from myself, from vacuum, from harm, from reliquary, from off menu, to the public technology of breathing, from the public technology of understanding, to land, to sea, from limits, from the notebook, the laboratory of subjectivity, from the ink liberating the paper, to the prosody of the excess animal. Past. There are no real forests. That milk light to everything else. The day. Lisp, the resin of anticipation. We are beads of being inside yourself, how the body is said. Borealism. A drooled structure described itself. Lichens. I get to be animal. I get to be a void. Beside 3 days of foxglove, dictionary of air was, once, the storage of that listening. The woven, weeded, sewn electric of words. Everything keeps going. The gesture cools the body, igneous, rapid glass ripple as I row the grease from a dream. Grease for a stuttering machine. When the glass door closes, a face sets in motion on all sides of speech. Was sad. Sold it for money. Was motherfucker. Repeated that. Anyway, like my speech, to be quiet. Anyway, to my inheritance, was over bloodline, was human voices resembling organ, resembling science, was humiliation or technology for public, was knowledge, sold that for money, inherited collective personal syndrome, was epic poem of possession, was entrails, sold sentence to think in words, anyway sensations of control, was connotation, sold for parataxis, anyways porno, the choir amplified in the tense of it. It was a response of stillness. Thanks.
Thank you, Ryan. That was.
Oh, wow.
Thank you. I carefully set aside. Now I need to retrieve my It's nice to just not speak for a moment after listening to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm very happy now to welcome Alicia Wright, whose poetry appears or is forthcoming in the Paris Review, Kenyon Review, West Branch, Jubilat, among others. She has received fellowships from the Iowa Writers Workshop and the University of Denver, where she is a PhD candidate in English and Literary Arts. She's the editor of Annulet and the forthcoming Annulet editions, and lives in Iowa City, where I was fortunate enough to meet her after, well, we'd met briefly at Typo Fest, and then we met again for longer after a reading when Alicia was the one who stayed and talked to us and was super interested when everybody else left, which was so, it was like really heartwarming for poets to have another poet who was happy to visit with us after a reading. And in Iowa City, she also hosts the occasional poetry reading series, Normie Creep in the Sacred Grove. I mean, just hearing that, you either want to go or you're afraid to go. I don't know which it is. That's the line that you're walking there. Alicia makes a space for lots of writers in these spaces, and I'm grateful for that. Annulet is an online poetics journal with poetry and reviews and other writing about and around poetry and prose, and you should check it out. And yes. And for that, and for her own work, where writers and language and many other things are welcome too. In one of her poems, there's a tuning fork, and I was thinking of the poem as tuning fork that welcomes and also sends out the vibrations of the air in her beautiful poem, You're Called by the Same Sound. And I think we all are called by the same sound tonight. Please welcome Alicia Wright.
Thanks for that introduction, Rick. That was one of my more unhinged social moments, but it was fun.
Yes.
I'm excited to be here reading these poems with you tonight, and Ryan invited me along to this, and I'm really just grateful for that invitation and for his work in facilitating the readings that we've done. And Ryan read for Normie Creep, and I think it went okay, so everyone's very confused.
It's a little scary, but
It was
generative scary.
Generative scary.
Yeah.
Right.
Structured scary.
Structure is scary. Okay. Honey in the rock. What's good in the mouth? According, trilled. Can't you see all what's been lost has did for me? I believe her, drank the living fountain. Times the pitch and pluck, bliss the perfect worker, ever amber. Oh, taste and see. blood, flood, cover. Holding the line. Through the winter, I walked from the stone house to the river, knowing only some of the purplish berries' names. Must be beautyberry, I'd note, while treading down the hill, slick on the hill, but for patches of inch-high moss, little firs, their luminous like thatched green, their star-cup bristles. That's when I look for what's intricate, rather than let my sense lead me afield. The fact is, I have to reconcile myself, if I want to go further than I have, to poetry's status as many things. How far can I go, and yet still come back? Boots slips, storm-felled pines, I could stop again over the broken glass, edging through the clay. That'd be one way to think over liquid partitions. Lodged in a hillside, in Cascades progress, they appear, prongs, ephemera, as though these angles have no master. Fingerless gloves and the globes of rain droplets orbing from the red berries, not holly, hard. I find to think of meaning, its source, hard and round, water spilling over my fingertip. I touch it, ruin it. Water soft. I walk to the river. How far does this stretch, I think, while lines nearly edge through, pitiful volunteers, impressions shading forward, tan pine needles lining a path taken nearly every day, as long as I can stand the cold. I lap the field's counter where the ground goes marsh, depression. How to reconcile parts to poetry I could not feel. The first time I found the gray fur, then the orange webbing, trailing 30 coiled feet behind, snagged, coyote's paw cinched, puffed, newly abandoned. I'd heard mewling at night, but mistook it. Death calls. Instead listening for notes of my own, I'd misapprehended the real sound. I thought of the coyote and thought, fur, bowed back neck, sink of muscle. I watched, noted it becoming bone. I walked through the blackberry brambles' frosted arc on Christmas Eve morning, and I did not lie down with it. I did not lie yet, though I longed to. Whatever meaning may be, I wouldn't make it, not there. Even as the king snake, usually underground, slipped past my hand, resting on the wet leaves, watching the river water move over the weir. Even as poetry, like the water, kept a low current. The last mid-afternoon, I stood in a gaze at the overlook, having forgotten myself, nearly still. In a stretch of seconds, the shepherd mix following the incoming truck crept around the bend. It fixed upon me, stepping low, lowering crouch, lowering its dead eyes, my thigh. The man waited seconds, then called his dog off. He waited as animal fear filled me, his whistle as master. Thought of a torn leg, the dog's jerking mouth. I walked back up to the pink sky, early fleabane catching my eye, the house obscured on the ridge, a thistle, as though a flower might cohere. Wreath. Honey locust barb, magenta thorn, blood root piping, unbearing you, the twisted band, in grief, smoke, your wound, a gray, marginal fern. If your mother, a cardinal flower, should divide you, alternate leaf and aureate stemming, sting the brain, voice and silence, bright circled brow, red-edged flush, lead reedy limb, round suture suckle, mechanically train your hooks into, you twining twin, liana stranded helix as you outgrow the banded throat and cicatrix sucker. You're called by the same sound. Shift of cool as you slip the nightgown over your head. Mirror collection of sounds, I answer. Slick glove of a pond dive, golden-eyed. Straight arrow plunge to the soppy weed roots. We're diving down at the call of it, made present in usage, practice, longing for her. Waterfall rushes from girl knees gliding, ambience turning to time in oxbow. You and I don't touch, but held in waves just past. Held and thought, breath never extinguishes. Two lives linked in air and sound. Which one of us a tuning fork I can't answer. I think I wanted to read this next poem deeply about my very mild but adventurous adolescence because of listening to this one album in the car on the way up on the drive. But fun. It's an origin story poem, which is a great form to use when in doubt. With lines from George Oppen. Once only in the deluge, joyride night was a time I saw unthinkable speed dash by. I didn't blink, so trained was I to the crest of the hill for headlights. Crouched raccoon behind the yew bush, skin tight, cropped cami I had chosen I hadn't eaten. This was a normal. This is my only story. The plan was to wait. I was wearing black. We know what I meant. The light, the blur sped around the corner, a freed contrail sprinting on the pavement, an animated fog body whipped around the bend. Though once I'd beaten you in a foot race, this has nothing to do with what I saw. I was faster. I was waiting for you. You were riding for me. Does what I saw hold any meaning for what I do? He'd stolen the car. We'd unbuckled. We'd unbelted the backseat. We broke the warehouse code for 4 14-year-olds. If our story shall end untold, to whom and to what are we ancestral? This is anything. What I saw that night, what I felt, was a boy body unsure on me as what I'd seen. Danny, we were spiderlings. I never told you why we could not ever, though you knew, and I had seen what I'd seen, that colorless specter. I'm from Georgia, and I think about that a lot. And I feel like it's part of what I have to think about in my work and how I move through the world. And one of the things I think about is the production of history, in particular literary history, since that creates dominant narratives that we all think about and live in, right, as a participant in that. And this poem takes there's a lot of allusions in it. You'll come to know one particular phrase from Walter Benjamin very, very intimately because I'll say it a lot. And then there's some George Herbert, some Jean Toomer, some Edward L. Baptist, and some other things in here too. So, let's see. Everything that rises. One after another, the angel of history. Women, rural, 9, 1536, 1547, 1550, the angel of history. 1551, 52, 1559, in business, 147, and the angel of history. Athletics, 245, 46, 565, and education, the angel of history. 266, 1533, 1536, 38, and flowers, 340, the angel of history. 385, folkways among. 451, 452, the angel of history. I can no longer hear the music, the angel of history. Singings all day. 1039 through 40, the angel of history. Sit-ins and civil rights movements, the angel of history. Southern literary messenger, 909, 933, the angel of history. Big thicket, 335, 350, 377, the angel of history. A cast iron farm bell, the angel of history. The bell rest friable, the angel of history. And the fricative air between tolls, the angel of history. Make a basket of kudzu twines, the angel of history. Though these forms are less common, the angel of history. Shoot the chutes. We had been in swimming and we had the angel of history. Hibbits, African, folk, 15th century, and contemporary, the angel of history, art, and among other things. The Cottonlandia Museum in the angel of history, 648, history and manners, the angel of history. I heard my mother ring the bell for the angel of history, the king snake in the bush, a branch painted, the angel of history. A dream of the red and black snake, the angel of history. Around my throat, tightening, the angel of history. The horse boys shouting in the dark street, the angel of history. Nothing's captured political office and established nativist, the angel of history. Would the angel of history know when memory, the angel of history? Father's House, 1978, is a grim novel exploring future, the angel of history. Let Gaines rest, the angel of history. In peace, the angel of history. The monograph had been adhered to in the Angel of History, 1838 copper plate, the Angel of History. He asked, what about sin? I'd forgotten. The Angel of History. South that has all but vanished, the Angel of History. The fracture in the ledger grave marker, the Angel of History. The dog that bit my father digs in it, the Angel of History. Most artists in the South have embraced the tenets of the Angel of History. What is loosely called modernism, the Angel of History. Hot knobs of the rooms I cannot enter, the Angel of History. Wreckage upon wreckage, the Angel of History. What calls from the dead in the flat air, the Angel of History. That I can hear, the Angel of History. Mass and a Norman-style Episcopal church in the South, the Angel of History. Mothballs and tin in the slat shelf pantry, the Angel of History. Collapse in her last kiss, the Angel of History. Technocolonialism, the barbs on the wire, the Angel of History. Illy 1049, image of 1492, the Angel of History. Bottle trees 495, 496, the Angel of History. Into the hulls of westward racing ships, the Angel of History. Went bags of letters unanswered, desperately calling the Angel of History. A tithe purloin cankers the whole estate, the Angel of History. The ledger, the fissure, the sin of the dog, the Angel of History. May at his peril further go, the Angel of History. Clay clods, the slippery elm leaf spray, the Angel of History. 386 as symbol, 586 and concurrent, the Angel of History. Myself no better than the Angel of History. The blood from my mouth, the Angel of History. The fourth escaped into the tall August sugar cane, the Angel of History. I also do research, clearly, and like to interfere with texts. And this is from a sort of local history text of Rome, Georgia, where I'm from, called Anecdotes and Reminiscences in a History of Rome and Floyd County. This is a kind of erasure poem called Buckshot, which is, you may know, has lots of little bullets in it. Mr. Stewart says deer used to run wild through the woods around Rome in the 30s, and that Jim Reagan shot one near the Etowah River and the foot of 3rd Avenue, about the location of the John W. Maddox place in front of the old J.A. Gammon home spot. Mrs. Robert used to have a pet deer given her by her father, William Smith, and she had seen deer jump the fences while the dogs chased them. Her deer became enraged, on one occasion, attacked a woman, had to be shot. This poem thinks a lot about the absurdity of boundaries, particularly I was looking at a map and how counties are made and how these are forms of colonial logic that just make zero sense. There's no one way to read it, as it is mimicking the form of a map, as you can kind of see. So I'll move through it randomly and cluelessly, like this guy in the woods. Surveyor John Seaburn, 1831, Cass County, Georgia, on Cherokee land. Few others would come by foot as I have carried myself westward over from the highlands, which so appeared as though God himself's right hand figured each hill. There are many pines, and birds are many, and bare signs are many, and I have only seen one as it looked to me. Lots to be lottoed if a man has God on his side, his number drawn, and the lot, and whatsoever might be, therefore, is his. Villages I'll divide so many, one lucky man will have to himself attain the chief part, who, when his number's called in a winning draw, he might bring his wife and offspring and all else to a house cleared out, and land, and thicket, yes, and the kettle air. Townships must be 6 miles square per the old rules, but not else present out here but those who stay hidden like. I am a cunning man, and I am well matched in my companion Bruno, like to use his teeth as. To do this work, I must picture the world from above, looking down and accounting for natural features. There are many rivers, creeks, spring-fed, and which draw such fertile. If I see no one, then no soul is here. I am fearful, and most often alone. It is lonely work. Bruno the dog follows. Up at the high tower camp, I, such company, though few of, tell of how I caught the George took. He was absconding with a woman. He, in God's truth, was dismounted, and I sprang upon him, the water from his This tract, I do not know if it will be retained, as it has unusual mounds. I know what they are, but not how. When I am not holding to my thoughts, the rectangular system becomes more particular. As a state agent, I have found employ, and that is more than any scrub patch of soil, the cotton plants, weak and failing. No one can change gods. But these are my first drafts, and my footprints as they make informal lines. Will not I have heard in Virginia a horrible rebellion has taken place, and so I sleep with my gun by my side. Won't shoot until I get word of land ahead, and if any. Plucking blackberries, ones not dry and scorched as I pass through. It is good work. I am one to lay down the shape of future. I do not often have to think of fellow man, only when I have need of other succor at encampment or to slake. Right angles in a series of right angles, the theodolite's fine eye is the sharpest, so I am told, like my rifle, with 2 more arms and poised to plot later on paper. Yesterday, a young deer, like a lightning bolt, through the pines nearly hung itself, catching my steel, half chain at the neck. Its hoof caught the key handle, and as it stumbled, I reached. I realize deer don't fare well in my world. So. But these animals get away with it. So it's a poem called Requiem with Flamingo Flock. Picture roseate necks extending into sun-warmed water, the red dipping under palmate shadow. The saw palms, petiole spines, languid bend, in salt air with 100 calls calling interlaced in reflection. Webbed feet lifting sand plumes, legs back angled, faces grazing, hooked bill as 2 palms cut together, then sailing away without flapping their wings. And just on the horizon, there was this huge line of pink. That's somebody talking about flamingos. In Gaffney, South Carolina, for Mullinax Inc., a lady's hat designed a fixed flamingo plumage in a braid along the rim, a wreath, the natural curvature of the feathers molded around the head, and a coquettish cap leaving birds' original skin discarded in sheaths and the carcasses to eat. A naturalist's 1860 account describes how, when the birds would molt, he and a hunter waded through the marsh to take them bulletless by the hand. Bird by bird, he took 100 from the flock to sell their meat. Let us remember them. Elusive prize, a colony sighted on a mudflat, would often disappear when hunters would return, their local guides unable to account for why they'd gone. A flamingo was killed in or before 1868 by a Captain R.S. Sheldon who, quote, worked 5 or 6 hours to get it, who skinned it and stuffed it, a skill he'd learned from an Englishman who'd come to Florida before the Civil War. He wrote, "It is the only flamingo I ever saw in Florida." Audubon's account remarks, "They usually move in lines." Other enterprising men would write to him in hints. The flamingo is a kind of bird that lives in lagoons having a communication with the sea. By canoe, bateau, by wading shoulder deep in alkaline-tinted mangrove mud, the men did pursue the shy, rose-colored, scarlet birds into the salt flats so deep within the swamp's interior the names of sites and records slip, likely one island but possibly another, a river mouth, the salt lake, the reservoir, the slick embankment downstream by 1 mile to find the secreted flock inhabiting Mud Lake, 24 so-called in state. Where are you, waiter? Do you know your footing among the water lilies, beach verbena, button bushes? Phenocopterus rubra peddling in lagoons, umbrella silhouettes stocked still on awnings, cotton shirts, straw hats shading reddened faces. Profligate flamingos casino profits, now they're taking Vegas. They sip fruits on beaches, which for them means possibly 3 partners. Wild birds. Hunters thought they had eliminated them by 20th century start, but Alice found a mallet uncooperative for the Queen's rigged croquet game. Its neck drop limp before her swing, or strike on an unending pitch where death's the stake. In the flock, the signals shift. A honk, a swerve of neck, a high tide plash. We'll glide at glimpse, at lightning strike. The sawgrass sears, it saw, they've seen. The ocean of the Gulf is slate, the ocean of the Gulf is mirror, arrow-legged. They trace their migratory pattern in clouds from Cuba, where they rest if they decide some spring, though our notes obscure, where they keep their home. It is the key, is Mexico. It is all land that bowls the Gulf's expanse. It is no mystery, but that our mystery is why we will not locate home from home and right to rest. A neck bends backward for to preen. A neck is serpentine, is filter, flute. A beak is islanded, tangerine to jet blackened as each wing edge. An eye is bigger than ubrain, is always golden in a head. Tongue sifts salty from the clear. Tongue flicks, flickering 100 times a lick. A tongue so sure in a sloped mouth, 1,000 sensing bristles drink the lake. In a disturbance of words within words, a field is founded, flamingos folded, colony to colony, and so unnoted found. They are not mine, not spoonbills, so similar and warm in color, mind. More that they swill this muddled earth, draw shrimp glow, seed glow, blue, green algae glow to color feather. They hear their fledglings calling from inside its egg before its hatch and speak it back. They drink, give back in particle. Milk made in throat, seeped out from mouth, their young straight beak alights to careful ladle. How they deposit every drop. How this secreted drip, flushed with carotene, depletes its makers, fills the blank and squawking fledgling up to color. Red nectar droplets spilling down its head, blood close, and is blood from the head. Thank you.
All right, thank you both so much. That's beautiful, Alicia. And thank you all for being here. We'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll have some time for a question and answer. There's some cookies and lemonade out there if people want something. So refresh yourselves and then come back and talk.
Should we stay here or pull the desks?
I realized didn't bring a regular notebook, so I just.
Oh, I love doing
I'm writing my notes in the back.
I love it.
Oh, yeah. I looked down and saw that.
So I'm writing on post-it. It's like
This is what I think.
I feel so efficient.
That's right. Because you can flip these all around your house.
People are looking around and saying,
Wow, he is an architect.
The map. Yeah. Can I see what it's?
Oh, yeah. That came to me, it was me.
That's all good things to do. Well, no. Yeah.
Nice to sit and listen with you, as always.
Yeah. Thank you.
Tomorrow.
Yes. 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 Sorry.
Lots to be lottoed.
Checking on
Yeah.
various situations.
Yes.
Things are calming down, it seems.
Everyone's like,
Yeah.
They're like,
oh,
weird.
that's great.
Thanks for
It's like, it might be clear to say, but it might not.
all your volunteering.
Do you want to cook?
Maybe, I don't know.
I was thinking about it in the window.
I am gonna dash though.
excellent.
Thank you both so much.
Thanks very much. It's really great.
Yeah, thank you for listening.
So Allison and I both wrote down secreted, secreted. At the same time, like, so I said, wasn't it called? And then she just.
Well,
holds up
maybe
a
you
book
wrote
and
down
she says-
secreted and she wrote down secreted.
Yeah.
Maybe vice versa,
It's
so
like
I can know.
pretty cool. Pretty neat guys. Yeah. Thanks very
Thanks.
much.
Yeah, nice to meet you both. Thank you.
Actually, yeah.
I can take one, unless you want to leave.
I'll hang.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
I think we're going to be a smaller group for the conversation part. Can people who are here just come a little closer? I think it'll be nicer and feel more like a conversation. Thank you. Yeah, sure.
Actually, yeah.
Slide up a row or two.
Electrolytes.
And then, especially with no microphone, we won't make our guests shout.
They did pretty good though. I could hear them, but
Yes.
But I'm right
Well,
here.
no, it's
Right, yeah, you're right there.
I mean, there's something nice about it for reading. I think you
Yeah, I
hear
get
it
it.
without the
I get it.
filter.
I talk quiet sometimes, like.
And we'll see if some more people filter back in. That's great. But for this smaller group, thank you for staying. So, what's on your minds? What do you want to ask? What do you want to talk about? People who listen will turn all the lights on.
I have like a bunch of them, so I'm trying to think. Me first? Well, I guess both of you can kind of do this, but I feel like it was more for Alyssa, correct? What?
Alicia, perfect.
Alicia,
Doesn't matter.
okay.
Yeah.
So like within my chapbook reading, I kind of involve like other characters, and so when you're talking about like your origin story, how far do you go with involving others that are part of your life with respect to your truth, but then keeping, you know, that side kind of private for them too, because they're very vulnerable or intimate kind of moments a lot of the time. So how do you go about that?
I think about mostly like what it would be like if they were right in front of me and I
Yeah.
were making this like aesthetic like secret basically, because I think poems are basically a version of telling a secret.
Yeah.
That's what to me, and that's sort of the impulse that I like to like write toward, is like, how do I make this secret thing clear? And so I think about it like, I'm like, if I were to say this poem and like look this person in the eyes and disclose these details in public, would they feel okay? You know, yeah, and that particularly for that person, and that's actually something I've never apologized to him for. So really, that poem is an apology. Yeah, which I just feel compelled to do for the rest of my life. So. Serious. It's a serious question, you know. So yeah.
Mm.
You can answer too.
Yeah. Like, oddly enough, Alicia and I were talking sort of about this on the drive here. When we were talking about, sort of divulging, when it comes especially to family, like
Yeah.
divulging familial secrets
Mhm.
or like guarded secrets. I don't want to speak for Alicia, but we both sort of commiserated around both at different times in our lives, various family members telling us to keep the family out of it.
Yeah.
But that, to me, that feels really unfair.
Yeah.
You know, as much as, I'm formed by it. you know, by hook or by crook, or like it or not, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it can be like really scary to have a warts and all approach, but that's sort of what life is.
Yeah,
You know?
I get it. I was
Yeah.
just looking for advice. 'Cause
Yeah.
Mine is like family related, so it's like, you know, you're still around them.
Uh-huh.
And so it's like, how do you balance it where it's like, I want to tell my side kind of things, but then not necessarily like break that bond that I have.
Yeah,
if
no,
that
it's a
makes
really good
sense.
question.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a difficult thing to navigate.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's great. And there's like a, you know, a respect in seeing things clearly and honestly that might feel painful to people or to yourself. I mean, in
Yeah.
both ways, but if you're just trying, you know, if the effort and intention is to see clearly
Mhm.
and like trust what will emerge from that, I think that comes through. Yeah, yeah. What are other people? Other thoughts? Questions? Yeah, Bailey. And then yeah, no, ask, 'cause I couldn't quite tell, but yeah, by all means,
I guess it's more for Alicia, how you talk about you're from Georgia and like now you live in Iowa City. I guess like, does now living somewhere else kind of bring you more to like feeling compelled to, I guess, writing about Georgia and history?
Yeah, it's a really good question.
That's a good question.
I can't see within I mean, with the exception of the map poem, which I like was at my parents' house in Georgia and woke up at 5 in the morning and just was like, and like made it. I typically can't really see my circumstance when I'm home. Everything is speaking, this is another kind of toward family question, but things are very crowded. People have their relationships and their experience, at least for me, become more dominant and I have to move within them. And at a remove, I can then get the analytic or the interpretive and then subsequently the ethical, political clarity that I need. Even as I feel those rote impulses when I'm there regressing at home. And then, yeah, with time and space and the supportive, particularly a writing community, outside of that, I find it much easier to begin to manifest and inhabit the forms of response that I want to have to the immediate environment of home. But it's really, you know, there's that thing that people say where you're like, your subject chooses you, and much as I have fought against that, I'm like, well, I'm losing and it's chosen me. And try as I might to want to be another kind of poet, that will probably be what I'm thinking through the entire time I write, so, yeah.
Thanks. And Balin, do you have your hand up too? What do you want?
So yeah, this is I guess for both of you guys. I might not word this super well, but how do you guys deal with or think about the reality that your work will inevitably be misunderstood or misconstrued by people, you know, against like what you guys are trying to say with your poetry versus like how people understand it? Is that something that you're like, oh, it's a shame that some people are not going to understand this, or is it like, do you think of it like, oh, I'm open to all different interpretations? Like, what's your chief understanding of that kind of reality?
Yeah. Another really good question. I think that the misunderstanding is like a sort of necessary, to me at least, the misunderstanding is a necessary contour of the act, and the like desire, like act and desire to write. I find that I am writing because I am seeking to figure out a misunderstanding within like my like sort of like experience on Earth, and so like I find at best, if I'm beginning to figure out what I'm writing too much, it really kind of freaks me out. I'm like prefer a small bit of sort of distance between my understanding of the thing and some sort of like nebulous like fog area where there is still, in addition to others experiencing a mystery that I'm trying to translate, but myself as well. And so, yeah, maybe that answers your question.
No, it's an interesting way to put it. Yeah, it does.
Yeah, like the misunderstanding is a part of, I think of it as like a part of the sort of improvisation that of which like existence and writing are constantly sort of like helixing around, and like so I'm just like attempting to generate a relatively solid relatively solid sort of like framework or photograph or understanding of like a specific moment or thought or something.
Yeah, I don't think you can write and never not worry about a range of interpretation. And I feel, and I think I still feel this way, like the Carlos Williams like poem is a little machine idea that basically, and my hope is that if I write the poem as in such tight attunement with what it is that I'm trying to establish or clarify, if I write the poem, if I get it just right, it will repeat that meaning and feeling without fail to anyone who reads it. And that used to be my metric for a successful poem. And then I began to write increasingly more abstract poems. And like in the poems I read, there's a real range from like, she's talking about plants, to like now she's literally talking about like Audubon. Like there's like narrative to abstract, and that is moving through that and being drawn to forms and approaches that utilize interpretation and understanding in different ways. I've kind of had to reconcile with like the fact that not some people will follow some things and other people will follow others, and that's okay. One thing I do worry about a lot is that I understand myself to be writing against a pretty big literary tradition that's gone pretty much unquestioned in certain corners of the culture where I'm from. And I sometimes worry, and this is like a real candid worry, that my work will be recruited, right, by the same forces that I'm writing against. And so that's a real risk of misinterpretation that I do think about, and I find that to be like that is very, very, very important to me, to be very clear as I can in that way, to control those parameters and to control the rhetorical positioning of what it is that I'm trying to do. So that's like, I guess when the poem is taking on more of a relationship to like the social or to politics, in not just like, we all are in those things all the time, but taking on the sort of like history of the history aspect. I want to be super clear. So, yeah.
That's really well said.
Thanks.
Yeah. Maybe it's like helpful to realize that writing for understanding is just like one sort of like context or structure of like writing things in general. And while it's like really important, I think also I'm really glad Alicia said that about like making sure that like it's like important to me that the thing I'm writing against cannot be like ever co-opted by that machine. I mean, it's like definitely easier said than done. But yeah, I'm glad that you said that. It's really important to me too. Yeah, me too. Ditto.
I feel like I have a question that follows up in a certain way, maybe, in thinking about what else writing is doing besides understanding or producing meanings. And it has to do with like, I guess the sound that you were making in particular, Ryan, of the feeling that the thing I wrote down was something like that the words didn't used to be there, or they're only there now as you read them, that you're arriving at them for the first time in some way. And then you had that line or that account of people moving through the dark by feeling the leaves, which
Yeah.
felt to me like a description of the writing that you were doing
Yeah.
in some way, that feeling. And there's something different, like the difference between feeling your way tactily through language is different than understanding your way through language. And so it felt like that was really operative in the way you were putting the words together. And I wonder, so it made me really curious, like one thing I know I've asked people, and some of whom are here still and some of whom aren't, we do things like, while you're listening, just write a bunch of stuff down and then arrange it.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm hearing in your, this sense of like, oh, all things coming from all different places
Yeah.
and arriving into sentences from many, you know, like one sentence feels like it might have 10 different sources or something
Yeah.
in sound.
Yeah.
So I don't know, that was a lot of different things, but one about sound rather than meaning driving the way things are going together, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe starting there and then good night.
Hi.
And the way, yeah, that feeling of like this account of writing as sort of feeling your way through the world.
Yeah. I think a lot about this is good. I'm going to try and sort of parse and packetize all these things together, but it's going to be really difficult. So I think a lot about words, sound, the activation of words sounding, activation of words meaning, and the context in which they arrive and then are presented, both on the page, but also when you're at a poetry reading, you don't have the page in front of you often to reference the words that are making the sound. So what's the impossible task of the person who's putting the sounds into air, which is kind of the final form of the poem in a lot of ways. I think a lot about like sort of poetic histories of poetry that were not taught to us, were taught to us as like sort of non-traditional or you know, sort of unorthodox methods of poetry or whatever, like, and specifically like poetic traditions that aren't derived from like Western European canon or whatever, right? All those poems were passed through ears and like mouths, right? And so like thinking about how words are like are music, but are also a form of noise. What kind of sounds happen when music ends? Like why do we call noise noise, and why do we call music music? And like what's melodious about like a power generator or like a car motor, and what's like especially pretty about like a human being playing a violin or a band playing. And thinking about the sort of improvisation that links all of those things to make some sort of like, you know, quote unquote orchestra or symphony or sort of symphonic environment. And thinking a lot about a woman named Pauline Oliveros was a lot smarter than I was, and sort of had this theory and practice of deep listening, in which you actually didn't really use your ears to listen all that much. You sort of used your body as like some sort of like haptic, you know, like sort of tuning fork or contact microphone to like figure out what the sounds were that were like really sort of resonant, but also came with their own meanings. And yeah, the feeling marking west by feeling. Yeah, I live in Kansas, but I didn't grow up there. I grew up in upstate New York, which is a like markedly more hilly place with a lot different flora. And it was like incredibly strange for me to see a tall grass prairie for the first time, and just rolling hills and like no trees. And for the trees to feel alien, it was just all tall grasses. And thinking about how, yeah, just the music that just like grasses play when you're just like standing in a field. I think that's all I have to say about that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions or thoughts? KJ.
Surprise, right? This is kind of for all three of you.
you and I have talked a lot about like what to do after I'm done with chapbook, and like particularly like finding some kind of group and community with writers inside of it. So I guess I'm just kind of curious how like each of you either found or ended up building this kind of community, because I know that's like vital to the livelihood of the writer, obviously. And like I have that here, but I'm not entirely sure if it's something that I have to pursue once I leave for here, or if it's something that I have to build with the people that I've already known. I don't know. How have you guys stumbled upon your A-team, if you will?
Well, I moved to New York against the advice of everyone, because they're like, a bazillion people like you want to do publishing, so good luck. And they were right. And even so, that's depressing, but people make it through all the time. It just wasn't me. But what I did learn was that it took a lot of like seeking out, taking classes, like being, okay with being a student, being okay with the loneliness that can come between classes, like learning how not to experience that loneliness as like peril, although the like ongoing states of deprivation or isolation from a creative community can be really, really hard, which is kind of what I feel sometimes when I'm home. But truth be told, I found my community through going to grad school twice. There are definitely other ways to do it. And there's a longer conversation about why that works, like that we don't have time for. But I will say that when I got to my first grad school, I just felt this incredible relief. Like, I've never felt like I was among so many other people who were like me. I was always a little alien and always a little off, not quite doing the right thing as I should. And then suddenly I was amidst like 50 other people who had been like that their whole lives too. Not to recruit you for grad school. But yeah, and then, I mean, there is the publishing aspect. I waited a long time before I started, and I think we have, different approaches, and I think you're better at it, so you should probably listen to what Ryan has to say about it. But I waited for a long time to start my journal because I wanted to I wanted to build my own credibility through publishing my own work, by editing other journals. I edited Denver Quarterly as part of my fellowship at the University of Denver. People could trust that I had good editorial practices, and my name could be on all the things, all the missives, right? Literary journals are forms of communication, right? They seem like coteries and like you can never get in them, and that's really not true. But what holds them together is the dialogue, right? The dialogue between editor and writer, and the dialogue between writer and reader, and how those things like collage and produce a sense of community too. So getting involved with a literary journal, wherever you may be, it is like definitely one of the best practical things you can do to continue to participate and look for a writing community.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
I just kept going to readings. I was just like the guy that just kept going to readings. I admittedly, as like someone who grew up in upstate New York and then eventually ended up in New York City for an extended period of time, it was it was like supremely easy to just like find a poetry reading to go to, and it's a lot of the world is not like that, and that's kind of a bummer. But it's really nice to just the people, some of the poets that I met through just going to readings are like fixtures, people that were always there, like I was always there, and then watching people read. Most of the time they would bring a small something with them, whether it be just a Xerox chapbook or whatever that you can just go make at the copy shop at Kinko's. Get yourself a long art stapler and just make 5 of them or whatever. And people who are reading would just be like, oh, I really like that. Oh, okay, yeah, like I'll have one, whatever. I think the part of that made sense to me is that someone who came up through in adolescence, came up through like sort of punk and DIY scenes, and like scenes that were sort of small, that operated sort of microcosmically, like bands that were on tour. You would just go follow the band on tour for a bit, and you'd barter for this and for that. Sort of like if you wanted to see it in the world, then you just did it, and you found a bunch of people that were like really supportive and like down and wanted to do something else. So you could sort of create a constellation of like-minded individuals who it would to use the metaphor, like pull you out of the pit if you fell down or whatever. And yeah, that when I started publishing books, I was like, okay, well, I will, they're getting rid of these printers in the art department. I will take them home. I won't ask anyone if they're ready to be taken. I will take the paper as well, and I will start printing the books, because I think I had like so many friends who were, I thought that they should have printed matter in the world. And so I was like, okay, well, let's make it matter then. Just like, do it yourself.
Yeah, and there's like a generosity at the heart of that, I think. And I know, like for me, I ended up in New York City at one point. I went to millions of readings, and that did not work at all for me. Like that wasn't the place for me to find people. And then when I ended up moving to the Midwest, and I'm like, oh, I'm never going to meet anyone who, what am I going to do? I'm going to be so alone living in a farmhouse in Beloit, Wisconsin. But then I met one poet who I could really, for me, that was the start of like, oh, this. And then in Madison, Wisconsin, I started going to poetry readings like at people's apartments, like Lewis. And in that tiny community that was not affiliated with any institution, that was where I first, like New York, I didn't go to the right places, I realized later, the story of my life. But in Madison, I somehow did, and it was because it was a small group of people doing it for the sake of doing it. And like my friend Jordan, who has a press now, he started just making like a broadside or a nice print of a poem for every reader who came through. And he just learned how to do it really well and generously. And he described to me then like, well, I realized this is something I can do for the poets who are coming through, and they're all, so rather than thinking of it in a career way, it was just a way of like your friends and people that you want to be good to, generous to, that you want to contribute something, and then you get welcomed in to that group, even though we all, you end up, it's people write different ways, and like that it doesn't have to be that you're all doing the same thing or you all agree on the same thing, but you find people in that way. So the scale of it is really surprising, like it can just be a couple of people and it makes all the difference. And if you start making something happen, like making your own little chapbooks to give out, or making some of your friends, or somebody you meet, like, oh, you should, I want to put some of your poems in a little those things really take on a life, and then you have a life, right? Whereas, when I was coming up, I thought, oh, you just have to win a contest. Well, okay, but then, like, I didn't know anyone when I finally won a contest, like, didn't change that. Now I had a book and, like, didn't know anyone, like, knew a couple other people, whatever. So the way you do it, like, I've learned, over time that there's this other way that was much more useful. So I think that, like, each other, and thinking about how to continue the spirit that you feel when you're in a class and you want to talk to the people, sometimes outside of class, or something goes beyond just that scope. Yeah. I wonder if we could do a little sound event as the final thing here. So when I was in college, Pauline Oliveros came and did a performance, and it was in the chapel. And when she arrived, she asked everybody to do this particular thing, which I've since read about in like various Fluxus places. But so what I'd like everyone to do is you just pick a note. You don't have to know what note it is, and just hum that note until you want to change the note, and then hum a different note. So everyone will be humming. You just hum a note, and then after a while you hum a different note. And we'll just do that for a little while, and then we'll all make a sound by doing it. Is everybody down with that? Okay, so yeah, don't worry if your note is different than everybody else's note. Don't worry about harmony. I don't understand those things, so I don't have to worry about it, and you won't either. You can close your eyes if that makes you more comfortable. That's what I'm going to do, because then I'll just be listening. So start humming, and then when you're ready to hum a different note, hum a different note. Okay? All right. And thank you to Ryan and Alicia for spending some
There was one time. when
time
we,
with
like,
us.
popped
One more round of applause for everybody. Yeah. Okay, thank you all for being here and staying. And
Thanks,
talking.
everyone. Thank you.
Great question.
Yeah, great questions. Really great questions.
And if you're in my class and you're going to talk to